From fully paid abortions to new migrant services, the Chicago Teachers Union's latest demands are raising eyebrows. Do teachers' unions care about students, or is there a deeper agenda at play? Join us as we unpack the controversy on Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and with me is Barrett McNabb.
Thanks, Kimberly. So the Chicago Teachers Union has a list of demands, and they are interesting to say the least. They want an increase in pay to $144,620 in the 2027-2028 school year. They want fully paid abortions for all of its members. They want new migrant services and facilities, and a host of LGBTQ-related requirements in training in schools. So let's go into each one.
In Chicago public schools, 14% of high school students tested at or above proficient level for reading and math. Meanwhile, at the national level, 26% of 12th grade students scored at or above the proficient level. So Chicago's significantly less than the national average.
Yeah, so they're looking for more money, but they're underperforming. Okay, got it. So the average teacher salary in the United States in 2022 through 2023 was $68,469, with the high cost of living areas like Massachusetts averaging $92,307. Now, the average private sector worker in Chicago earns just over $61,000 versus a Chicago teacher earning $93,000 this year. So they are significantly overperforming the private sector workers.
Yes, while underperforming in school grades. The city is currently projecting deficits of up to $1.5 billion for 2025. The primary drivers, of course, are recurring deficits like city large pension and debt services costs, like the teachers' unions. And in their list of demands are paid for abortions. Now, how is that related to their job?
Yeah, I don't see that being related to their job. I mean, if they have health insurance, that's awesome. Whatever their copay is, that's awesome. But to have a specific call out on abortion, I think, is problematic because, why isn't cancer, a specific call out? Why isn't, a stroke a specific call out? So I think having a hot button issue like abortion being a specified call out,
it's just politics.
It's politics, yeah.
And they also want more resources for immigrants. Now, if they really cared, shouldn't it about their school, they wouldn't want to stretch out their resources anymore. So they should be calling out for the city to no longer be a sanctuary city. I mean, more immigrant children means fewer resources. You can pump money in, but you only have so much space. You only have so many teachers, and you're having more languages being spoken and more confusion because, if you don't speak English, you're not going to understand the lessons. And, okay, they're already doing such a bang-up job with the 5 hours a day they get the kids in reading and math, apparently by their fantastic testing scores. Let's add to the list of things to do. China's not doing any of this immigration and LGBTQ stuff.
Right. I mean, that's one of the big problems that we're having in Texas and in border towns and things like that is with the influx of South American immigrants, Central and South American immigrants. And they're coming from everywhere. They're coming from Europe. They're coming from Haiti, Dominican Republic, everywhere. Got it. But still, as these immigrants are bringing their children and those children are going into schools, resources are taking away from the American citizen children in keeping them on track. What's happening is the education system for these particular children coming from whichever country they came to was not at full speed. And so a lot of the teachers are having to do catch up to non-citizen children to the detriment of American citizen children. And honestly, taxpayer dollars shouldn't be going to this. Now, you brought up a great point about China. I mean, China has a unity of effort and a higher place on education than the United States does on the by and by. In fact, if you look at South Korea or you look at Japan, China, the priority on education is significant.
Well, I think they understand that education really should start at the home.
Right.
Because we work with our kids a lot on reading. I mean,
Right.
it has to start there, and that way when the kid does get to school, they understand, like, yes, I need to do this. I mean, the more adults you have emphasizing something to a kid, the more likely they are to realize it's important.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be multifaceted approach. Low be the parent that the child comes home and you don't ask them about their school day, you don't ask them about their homework, and spend a little bit of time. Oh, they'll just figure it out. I mean, the parents need to be involved as well. But China is way ahead of us by spending more of their time, again, on math, science, and reading, and it's a true brain drain. We have about 250,000 Chinese nationals in our universities, while only about 9,000 Americans are in Chinese universities. So we're spending, some of that is subsidized. I mean, some of it is private schools, but if it's a state schools, yes, have out-of-state tuition, but they still subsidize some of that education cost. And so we have, slots that are being taken up by Chinese nationals. And again, this is not a race thing. This is about spots in universities where some students get turned down because they don't make the cut, but then we have international students that are coming in. And what's happening is that research is, if it's a research university and they're looking at applied material science, if they're looking at textile science, mechanical engineering, we're spending a lot of our research hours in training these Chinese national students that go back to China. Mm-hmm. And take that knowledge with them. And now some of them apply for visas to stay here. But then again, we run the risk, just as we've seen in multiple cases of corporate espionage. We have Chinese nationals that become U.S. citizens that are selling secrets back to China. And, it's problematic that way as well.
Well, one thing about the international students, I think that are appealing for universities is a lot of them have to pay like the full ride. So there's a financial benefit there. Now, with Chicago looking at a big deficit coming up in 2025, you have to ask, well, what happens when the city goes bankrupt? I mean, yeah, it could maybe look politically bad for the mayor and the city council. Well, this mayor in particular, the teachers union endorsed and put a lot of money behind, and so he's been returning the favor. So I don't think he would be seen too badly if the city of Chicago went bankrupt.
Yeah, this is really interesting because they could reorganize their debts, but they may not be able to hire as many teachers, especially since overall federal funding that was related to the COVID pandemic has dried up. And so there are a lot of municipalities that are laying off teachers right now. But still, as the city reduces the amount of debt owed by revising pensions, there's, I'm sure, lawsuits that go into that, union contracts, restructuring municipal bonds. But, most recently, Detroit had a huge financial burden and had to go into bankruptcy. And they have a museum with a lot of priceless art. And there was a proposal that they may have to liquidate their art in their museums in order to go through this bankruptcy reorganization. And there was a huge pushback, and so there were two kind of courses of action: that the art would be sold, but that it would remain in the museums for people to look at, or there was the ability to just eliminate that portion out as an asset for the city, and so it couldn't be touched by creditors. But still, it's a bad deal for a city to go bankrupt. I mean, obviously it's not like the city disappears.
Yeah, and they don't stop collecting trash or anything like that. But major projects may not get done. Roads may not be repaved because, it's like, well, we had to restructure our debt, so we're not going to spend it on new roads. But, they may have a harder time getting loans out, may have to get permission from creditors to do any new projects. So I think the teachers are being a bit selfish and not just caring not about the students, but also about the city in general, because they're sucking up resources from the city.
Right. I mean, if in a bankruptcy, the city, the state or federal government had to appoint a city manager, which would be different than the mayor, but basically that would be the person with the checkbook, and the mayor would need to to ask permission to do anything. But municipal bonds, I mean, the interest rates would have to be higher because they're more risky, right? So if somebody's going to buy a municipal bond, they're going to want to make sure that they are not getting a junk bond, and those rates are going to be really high. So it's going to cost the city even more money.
Oh, I'm sure the city manager would require a salary too.
Right.
So.
Yep.
No winning, but it's just funny how things can operate in such an opposite way from the private sector. I mean, if you have your own mom and pop shop and you're losing money in the business, and if employees' performance metrics, aka student scores, their metrics are abysmal, the employee may get fired, but they're definitely not getting a bonus and get things that have nothing to do with enhancing their ability to do their job, like LGBTQ issues. And I mean, that has nothing to do with test scores.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with test scores.
And things that hinder an employee's job performance, like immigrants that don't speak the language and may not have had prior schooling, they're going to slow the class down because the class can only be as strong as its weakest student.
Right. And there's secondary effects as well. I mean, we obviously talked about the language problems, but a lot of these students do not have vaccinations as well. Mm-hmm. And so who pays for that? Well, we do. The taxpayers do. And so we're having to spend a lot of money and resources in not only getting these students up to speed, but getting them the ability to physically come into the public school system with all their vaccinations and physical exams and things like that. And again, that's us paying for it. So there are a lot of secondary and third order effects that people aren't really thinking about. Oh, hey, it's just great. Let's just let everybody in and occupy these schools. But the teachers are overworked. The teachers are underfunded, and let's exclude the the salary for a second. But how often have you heard teachers are buying their own school supplies? And I can promise you, 100% of the school supplies for immigrant children are going to have to be subsidized because the parents don't have a legal right to work. So who's paying for that? Obviously, there's a combination of taxpayer money that's doing it, but also charitable giving that's doing it. But again, there are American citizens that also have problems in getting school supplies. Now, honestly, rather than this outrageous salary of $144,000, more than I ever made in the Army.
I've never made half that much.
Yeah, that's crazy, crazy money. But what I would like to see is instead of that being spent on teachers, being spent on low cost or free food in the schools. I mean, honestly, the biggest travesty of any society is when a child is going hungry, because a child can't really do anything. And so that's one of if there was going to be money spent, that's where I'd prefer money be spent on making sure that children get a healthy meal.
Well,
for free.
Another thing they could do is, I mean, they're already making $90-something thousand a year.
Right.
That's a lot of money.
It's more than I make.
And
way more.
They could keep their salaries the same. And if you're going to keep bringing in immigrant children, if you're going to insist on doing that, maybe have separate sections of the school or something like classrooms just for remedial English.
Sure.
To get some kids caught up. That way you're not dragging the American citizen students down.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that would be money better spent.
Yeah, we saw this article, and obviously Kimberly listens to a lot of podcasts. I listen to podcasts infrequently, but every once in a while. But I spend a lot of my time reading, and there hasn't been a lot of talk about this subject, about this massive pay raise for Chicago area teachers. And I think one of the big problems that the unions have is that they're having a declining membership. And so because there are right-to-work states, and the Supreme Court has said that being in a union is not a mandatory condition of employment. And so people are finding out, young teachers are finding out that they don't have to be part of the union in order to do their job. Now, the unions are not doing a good job of letting people know that, right? And so they want to make it seem as though that it's only their power and you signing up and giving your money that you can have your job. And we're seeing declining membership in unions, because not that teachers want to save their money. I mean, they don't want their money to go to causes they don't believe in, and the teachers unions are often going against their moral compass,
right?
And how they give money to politicians.
So maybe this outrageous money grab in their salaries is a way to attract more members.
Yeah, I mean that's the only thing I can think of. But in my opinion, teachers unions were probably needed at some point in time. I'm sure there was a point in time where teachers earned a dollar a day. And so they had to band together and say, look, we know we need to at least earn $10 a day, or whatever it was. At some point in time, there was a period where teachers were clearly taken advantage of, but I think that gap has largely been eliminated. I mean, you may still see some rural teachers that are in a very, very poor school district, and they just can't afford to pay them. But the cost of living would be lower as well. Yep. So we saw this, and we wanted to bring it to you. And thanks for tuning in, and please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.